Welcome back, lovely ladies. If you want to become the woman of your dreams, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video. And join our Patreon for even more exclusive content. Now, let's dive into today's story.
Alistair had hoped his job would launch him into a bright future. He was in his early 20s and fresh out of university, excited to be on a team that tackled fascinating projects. The hours and tasks could be grueling at times, but they captured his interest and kept him going. The paycheck was decent for someone just starting out, and at first he believed he had landed exactly where he needed to be. Yet, a couple of years in, he felt sidelined. Promotion opportunities came and went, and his manager, Ben, seemed almost blind to his presence. In weekly team meetings, Ben would praise everyone for their vital contributions, but Alistair noticed some were praised more than others. A few times, Alistair spoke up with an idea, only to be ignored or to have Ben mistakenly believe someone else had spoken. Things reached a frustrating point one Friday night at the usual after-work gathering. Most of the group had drifted home or to the other side of the large table, leaving Alistair and Claire sitting next to each other. Claire was a brilliant, tall woman with striking presence and a keen mind. Alistair always admired her ability to think on her feet, though he also felt, for reasons he couldn't quite articulate, that there was a certain friction in the air whenever they talked. Perhaps it was because they seemed so different from one another. That night, after they each had a couple of drinks, the conversation steered from local football, a topic neither cared much about, to work. Alistair admitted he felt miserable for missing out on yet another promotion, especially because someone with less experience had just been elevated over him. Claire leaned closer, pushing her thick hair behind her ear. "The main project is run by Ben," she said, "and I've noticed a trend. He's big, confident, one of those fitness-obsessed guys with broad shoulders. Maybe you've noticed that the people who get ahead in his space tend to fit a similar look? Mostly tall, confident men, or, every now and then, a petite, soft-spoken woman who catches his eye for being both skilled and feminine. I'm neither petite nor soft-spoken, and I've sure had no luck. I think you run into the same issue from the other side. You're not tall, you keep your head down, and you're pretty quiet." Alistair slumped, feeling the sting of her words. They weren't delivered cruelly, just matter-of-factly. "So, if I look taller, that might have given me an edge for the job." Claire swirled the remains of her drink. "I'd bet on it. And if I were 5 inches shorter and ultra-feminine, maybe that'd help me. But it isn't just about height, is it? There's a mold he likes, people who look confident in a certain way." Alistair nodded. "He expects guys to be tough and charismatic. And if a woman's in the mix, she has to be feminine." Claire shrugged. "Exactly. I don't fit into that box, and neither do you." Alistair paused. "It's all pretty shallow if you think about it." "Agreed," Claire said. "But it's what we're dealing with." Alistair stared at his now empty glass. He hesitated, struggling with an urge to bring up something else. For a moment he recalled private thoughts he'd nursed for years, that he'd often felt more comfortable blending softer elements into his life, that he'd occasionally worn dresses in secret, at first just to see how it felt, then because it appealed to him in ways he couldn't readily explain. He had never spoken about this to anyone, and he certainly didn't plan to reveal it to Claire, but it stayed on his mind. They left that bar soon after. Claire, finishing her beer, grabbed his hand with a mischievous grin. "Let's check out a place you might enjoy," she said. The last few co-workers waved them off, teasing Claire about holding Alistair's hand. She tossed back a light-hearted remark before leading him through the streets. 15 minutes later, Alistair found himself in a bar he had never visited. It was cozy yet lively, and as soon as they walked in, a few patrons called Claire's name, hinting she was a regular. Before long, Alistair noticed couples of all kinds, men with men, women with women, and plenty of people simply being themselves, wearing what felt right. He gave Claire a questioning glance, and she patted his arm. "Welcome to a spot where no one bats an eye at who you are," she explained. She gestured discreetly to someone with shaved hair and tattoos. "That's my ex. We tried to stay friends, but let's just say we wanted different things in life." Alistair tried to hide his inexperience with these surroundings. He had gone to a small university, grown up in a small town, and never really embraced nightlife in big, diverse venues. It made him feel both curious and uncomfortable, but nothing alarming. He just felt like he'd stepped into a new world where different rules applied. Claire chatted animatedly about a few of the people who passed their table. Then she raised a question that made him pause. "If the problem at work is that we're not the right type, how do you think things would be if you were, say, a strikingly dressed woman? Even if you couldn't be taller, you could be, I don't know, more noticeable?" Alistair choked on his drink. "Dress like a woman at work? That would be a shock. I'd get laughed out of the building." Claire's eyes flashed with interest. "I'm not necessarily suggesting you do that in front of everyone. But what if you tried it privately? You know, just to see how it feels. You once said you admired how Paul, remember him, walks around wearing whatever he wants. That might give you a sense of confidence you never get to explore." With that, Alistair felt the old urge to confide in her about his secret habits, that he did have a history of wearing skirts behind closed doors. But he hesitated, painfully aware that such a confession might change how Claire viewed him. He dodged giving a direct answer, but after a couple more drinks, they parted ways with broad smiles, both feeling that something had shifted between them. By Monday morning, Alistair was observing the team meeting with a sharper eye. As Claire had pointed out, the people who spoke with authority matched Ben's brand: tall men who commanded attention, or a few women who fit a particular style. Alistair texted Claire that evening, "We should meet. I have an idea." They ended up in a casual cafe after work, sipping coffee instead of beer. "So," Claire said, tapping her mug, "what's on your mind?" He exhaled. "I've been thinking. You said a while back that men in our office only get noticed if they seem assertive and confident. But I don't really know how to adopt that persona. Then you also mentioned how much I liked seeing guys who dress boldly, like Paul. Well, I keep wondering, what if, theoretically, I went out dressed like a woman and practiced carrying myself differently?" Claire's eyebrows rose. "Not necessarily at work, right?" "Of course not," he replied quickly. "I mean in a safer environment, just to see if it affects how I behave or how others respond to me." He lowered his voice. "I've, actually worn skirts in private before. Years ago." She leaned in. "That's intriguing. I had no idea. So do you want to give it a real try? Like go out somewhere you can blend in and feel comfortable?" He squirmed in his seat. "I'm not entirely sure I'm ready. It's one thing to imagine it, another to do it." Claire's face lit with a grin. "Then let me help. We can make a proper outing of it. I can help you dress, handle makeup, everything. My place on Friday?" A part of him screamed that this was a terrible idea. He'd never let anyone see him in a dress. But a stronger part felt intrigued, drawn to the possibility of exploring this side of himself. Though he hesitated, he eventually nodded. "I guess I can come by Friday." "Wonderful," Claire said. "We'll figure it out together." That week at work crawled by, with Alistair's heart pounding every time he passed Claire in the hallway. The anticipation frightened and thrilled him. He stayed at his desk trying to focus, but memories of the last time he'd secretly worn a skirt years ago kept popping up. He wondered if he'd still enjoy it as much as before. He wondered how Claire might react. Finally, Friday arrived. Alistair struggled to concentrate from the moment he clocked in, so distracted that a co-worker asked if he felt ill. By lunchtime, he told his supervisor he was feeling under the weather, and they let him head out early. Claire took the same excuse, catching up to him at the exit. "Feeling nervous?" she teased gently. "You could say that," he admitted. They took a bus to her apartment, made some tea, and soon Claire revealed an array of packages she'd ordered from various online shops. "I had to guess your sizes," she explained, "so let's see what fits." She directed him to the bathroom. "Try these on, a skirt, some tops, and the right underwear. Let's start there." Alistair swallowed dryly as he slipped into the bathroom. Though he had privately worn skirts before, never had it felt quite this real. He pulled on a lacy bra, a pair of soft briefs, then a blouse, and a smooth knee-length skirt. When Claire asked how it fit, he hesitated, then opened the door. She looked at him with open admiration. Lovely, but no girl's complete without a bit of makeup. She patted the back of a chair in front of a mirror. "Come on, have a seat." Minutes passed into half an hour as she worked on his foundation, eyes, and lips. He could feel the gentle brush of powders, the sticky glide of lip color, the subtle sensation of mascara on his lashes. Then came a wig, medium brown and a bit long, enough to frame his face. When Claire finished, she guided him to a mirror in the living room. Alistair stared at his reflection, feeling a strange rush of both surprise and satisfaction. The person he saw looked strikingly different from his usual self, yet he recognized something in the posture and expression. He slowly lifted a hand to push back a lock of hair. "You're quite a vision, Allison," Claire announced, using a feminine variation of his name. "What do you think?" He couldn't find the right words at first. It's surreal," he finally managed. "But it feels oddly right." They lingered over a quick meal and more conversation, giving Alistair time to adjust. Claire encouraged him to practice walking in low heels so he wouldn't trip when they went out. The simplest tasks, like walking from room to room, felt brand new and exciting. The gentle swish of the skirt against his stockings, the clack of heels on the floor, it all made his heart pound. He wondered how he would handle stepping out in public. Yet just an hour later, that was exactly what they did. Claire had dressed in a bold outfit, a sleek pencil skirt, and a stylish semi-sheer top. Her confidence seemed unshakable as she led him into a taxi. Alistair sat quietly, aware that the driver was checking out the pair of them in the rearview mirror. He felt exposed. Claire leaned over and whispered, "Don't worry, you look great." They arrived at a lounge that Claire said was a comfortable spot for people across the spectrum of style and identity. Some guests wore jeans and hoodies, others wore glittering dresses, and there were plenty of casual couples around. After they got a drink, Claire steered him toward a table. The hustle and bustle eased his nerves a bit, and soon they were chatting with different people. No one seemed to question the fact that Alistair was new to dressing this way. At one point, 2 men asked to join them. They chatted politely, offered to buy drinks, but when Claire held Alistair's hand to drop a subtle hint, the men backed off with a friendly laugh. Alistair found himself exhaling in relief, though part of him felt a small flash of curiosity. Were they looking at him as a woman, or did they know he was a man in a dress? He and Claire hopped to another club afterward. It was more lively, featuring bright lights and a dance floor, a swirl of vibrant styles, some people in flamboyant outfits, others in more subdued gear, made for a memorable sight. Alistair took it all in, mesmerized. Claire introduced him to random friends. Everyone accepted him as Allison without fuss. Eventually, she nudged his arm. "See that guy over there, wearing the white shirt? He's looking at you." Alistair turned nervously, locking eyes with a guy named Adam. He was tall, well-groomed, and wore a curious smile. Before long, Adam approached their table. He spoke with Claire first, then turned to Alistair, asking if he wanted to dance. The music was getting louder, and conversation was tricky, so Alistair accepted just to do something besides shout over the thumping bass. Dancing in a skirt was a rush. Every sway of the hips felt different than usual, and Alistair realized he couldn't remember the last time he had danced so freely. Adam was respectful, not overly pushy. After a couple of songs, they decided to grab a drink. Adam ordered for both of them some fruit-flavored cocktail. They tried to talk more, but with the music ramping up, they ended up exchanging just a few questions and observations. Though Alistair couldn't figure out if Adam saw him as a genuine woman or simply liked that he was dressed this way, he felt flattered by the attention and comforted by Adam's relaxed manner. When Claire saw how tired Alistair looked after a while, she declared it was time to go. Adam, disappointed, slipped Alistair a small card with his number. "Call me if you like," he said, leaning in to give Alistair a friendly peck on the cheek, which landed partly on the corner of his mouth instead. Caught off guard, Alistair ended up giving him a light returning kiss. They parted with slightly flushed faces, and outside, Claire teased him about it. That night ended with Alistair feeling something new. Maybe there was a place for him wearing feminine clothes among people who simply appreciated a free spirit. It felt refreshing to let go of certain boundaries. However, the next morning, he was left unsure about whether it was something he wanted regularly or if it was a one-time experiment. Over the following weeks, Claire nudged him to go out again as Allison, suggesting they meet new people, maybe drop in on Adam if he was interested. Alistair resisted at first, but the more he dwelled on that evening's thrill, the more he found himself drawn back to the idea. In his spare time, he watched makeup tutorials online, learning to blend foundation and contour better. He browsed fashion sites to see what clothes might flatter his shape. Gradually, he assembled a small wardrobe of items that fit properly, instead of relying solely on borrowed outfits from Claire's stash. Eventually, he invited Claire to his own small flat one Saturday evening, telling her he'd been practicing. She arrived, and Alistair greeted her at the door dressed in a simple pink dress, neatly applied makeup, and beige heels that gave him a graceful posture. Claire's eyes lit with delight as she looked him up and down. "Wow," she murmured, stepping inside. "Check you out. You've been training hard, haven't you?" He gave a little twirl, the hem of his skirt flaring. "I have. I'm actually enjoying this more than I expected." "You look amazing," Claire said, hugging him. "Ready to hit the town?" They had a calmer evening than before, but it was fulfilling in its own way. They ate at a small bistro and talked about work, sports, family gossip, and clothes. Claire noted how at ease Alistair seemed in his new persona, and he admitted that each time he went out like this, the nerves lessened. One potential complication lingered, though: the chance someone from work would spot him. That would be awkward, Claire agreed. But what's life if you don't take a few risks? He shrugged, sipping his drink. "I guess so. How about Adam? You think I should text him?" "Couldn't hurt," Claire said, wiggling her eyebrows. Still, Alistair hesitated for another couple of weeks before messaging Adam. To his surprise, Adam responded enthusiastically, suggesting they meet for a drink. Claire gently nudged him to dress a bit more boldly. "He saw you at a club. He's already interested. Show up looking confident." Alistair eventually chose a slightly more revealing dress, nothing outrageous, but enough to highlight a new sense of style. He arrived on a Saturday night at a corner near Adam's suggested bar. The moment Adam spotted him, he broke into a big smile and greeted him with a light kiss on the cheek. They ended up at a modest Thai restaurant first, laughing over a shared plate of appetizers. This time they had a real conversation about Adam's life in the city, Alistair's job, mutual hobbies, and how Alistair came to be dressed so elegantly. Adam took it all in stride, mentioning that he found it attractive when someone dared to dress in a way that felt right to them. They spent more time together over the following weeks. Alistair found Adam fun, though he sometimes came off as particular in what he wanted. Adam encouraged him to buy new clothes that were even more form-fitting. He complimented Alistair's attempts at styling his hair or wearing wigs, praising how it made him stand out. Though Alistair appreciated the support, he occasionally felt a bit pressured when Adam offered too many suggestions, like a script he was expected to follow. Meanwhile, back at work, Alistair noticed a small but real shift in how others treated him, especially Claire. She no longer teased him about cross-dressing. Instead, she sometimes asked whether he planned to go out that weekend in a new outfit. It was a light-hearted code between them. Nobody else in the office seemed to suspect a thing, though Alistair did catch a raised eyebrow every now and then at how neatly he maintained his appearance. Moisturized hands, subtly shaped eyebrows, and hair that looked a fraction longer than before. Then, a twist arrived. One evening, Alistair and Claire were relaxing in a laid-back bar they both liked. Both were dressed casually. Alistair wore slacks, but had done his face lightly with foundation, while Claire wore jeans and a fashionable shirt. The place was known to be welcoming to LGBTQ patrons. Across the room, they spotted none other than Ben, the boss who hardly noticed Alistair at work. He seemed startled to see them, and they felt equal shock. Claire decided to be bold and walked over for a quick hello. Alistair watched from the table, heart pounding. Ben nodded at Claire and gave Alistair a fleeting, puzzled look from across the room. A small conversation ensued, but soon he drifted away, probably embarrassed or confused at being found there. Claire shrugged it off, but Alistair felt a cold knot of worry form in his stomach. On Monday, Ben surprised everyone in their team meeting by calling on Claire more than usual, asking for her insights. Alistair sensed a new tension in the air. It felt as if Ben was rethinking everything he thought he knew about his staff. Alistair also felt Ben's gaze flicker his way several times. During a break, Ben pulled Alistair aside. In a tone that tried to sound casual, he asked if Alistair had a sister who looked similar. Alistair said he did not. Ben gave a slow nod, then mentioned possibly seeing someone who looked just like him out in the city. Alistair faked a dismissive laugh, explaining it must have been a coincidence. Ben didn't look convinced. Later, Claire admitted Ben had asked her to meet him for a drink, presumably to discuss this matter further. She went, nervous about what might happen. But rather than threaten her or Alistair, Ben confessed to feeling conflicted about parts of his personal life. He hinted that he was questioning how he wanted to move forward socially. Claire said he seemed to be wrestling with more than just managerial choices. There was something personal about his tone. Within a week, Ben cornered Alistair in the office after another routine meeting. This time, no one else was around. He asked Alistair to come by his office. Inside, in an uncharacteristically tentative way, Ben asked how Alistair was doing, whether he felt he had enough opportunities, and how he saw his future in the company. Alistair tried to answer honestly, but he could feel Ben watching him with a piercing gaze. All of a sudden, Ben revealed what was on his mind. "I've been thinking about that night in the bar. I'm not entirely certain, but I have this strong suspicion it was you there with Claire. And if so, I wanted you to know I don't plan to cause trouble about it." Alistair froze. Fear roiled inside him. He had never planned to let someone from work, least of all his boss, see him presenting as Allison. After a moment of stunned silence, Alistair swallowed hard and admitted, in halting phrases, that yes, it had been him. Ben nodded with a small smile. "Claire told me a bit about the places you visit, and I've been confiding in her about a few personal matters. If you're open to it, could I meet you somewhere sometime, just to talk about how things function in that circle of the city?" Still reeling, Alistair worried that refusing might create an even bigger problem, so he hesitantly agreed. "All right," he said. "I'll meet you on Friday, but please keep this between us." Ben agreed. The plan was set. That Friday, Alistair found himself dressing once again at home, wig carefully styled, eyeliner neat, wearing a fitted sheath dress. It was more elegant than his outfit from that first night out. Ben, in a sleek car, collected him from outside his apartment. The drive was short, full of awkward small talk about the weather and office deadlines. They ended up at one of the calmer bars Alistair sometimes frequented with Claire. There, they spoke more candidly. Ben confessed to having put on a tough guy act at work for years and was tired of it, wanting to discover what it meant to step out of that mold. Alistair listened, unsure how to guide his boss through such personal territory. The evening was surprisingly pleasant. Ben dropped him home later, politely kissing Alistair's hand as if unsure how else to say goodnight. They agreed to meet for a Sunday lunch soon, and that was exactly what happened. They drove to a country inn, far from prying city eyes. Nobody from the office would see them, and they could enjoy roast dinners while chatting about everything from colleagues to the local sports scene. The conversation felt natural. Alistair found himself laughing more easily than he ever did in team meetings. Ben asked direct questions about Alistair's life, both day-to-day routines and weekend ventures. The open atmosphere made Alistair realize that, for all Ben's imposing presence at work, he was personable and refreshingly earnest one-on-one. Soon these outings became a pattern. Adam, on the other hand, had begun to pull away, upset that Alistair was spending more time with someone else. Alistair tried to explain that he and Ben were talking about personal growth and that there was no serious romance unfolding, but Adam wasn't reassured. Their relationship had become rocky, especially because Adam often pressed Alistair to present in ways that didn't always feel comfortable. Eventually, Adam declared he didn't see a point in continuing if Alistair was seeing someone else, and they parted ways. While that end felt abrupt, Alistair couldn't deny that Adam's controlling streak had grown tiring. He left that chapter behind and turned his attention to new horizons. With Adam gone, Ben became an unexpected fixture in Alistair's life. One Saturday, Ben asked Alistair, dressed as Allison, to accompany him to an upscale restaurant. They dined on fine cuisine and sipped wine. Conversation flowed easily. Jokes about silly office incidents, mild gossip about changes in the project, confessions about their families. After dinner, Ben invited him up to his high-rise apartment with a view of the city. Alistair was intrigued to see the place. They stepped into an elegant lobby, and a friendly face at the desk greeted them politely. In the elevator, Ben turned to look at Alistair's reflection in the mirror. Alistair, aware of Ben's eyes on him, felt a thrill run through his chest. They arrived at the apartment, a large open-floor space with glass windows offering panoramic city lights. It was breathtaking. "You like it?" Ben asked, standing close. "It's gorgeous," Alistair said quietly, resting his handbag on a nearby sofa. They drifted to the window together, gazing at the city. Ben fetched 2 glasses of sparkling wine from the kitchen, and they sat with a sense of calm. Slowly, conversation gave way to a more personal closeness. They shared a tender kiss, gentle and unhurried. It was a stark contrast to Alistair's past experiences, which often felt rushed or uncertain. Here there was an unspoken understanding as they embraced. Their bond grew over the following months. Sometimes Alistair came over only for an evening meal, other times for the entire weekend. He discovered that Ben valued his insight on work projects and often asked him for help preparing reports. Outside the office, they spent mornings at little cafes, took evening walks, and planned day trips. The dynamic was respectful, with both men learning what it meant to relax around each other in a way they never could in the corporate environment. At work, changes became visible. Ben recognized the talents of all sorts of employees. Claire, once overlooked, received more attention, and others in the team noticed that Ben was stepping away from old biases. Alistair, meanwhile, had finally begun getting recognition for the behind-the-scenes tasks he'd always excelled at. After a half-year of dating, though not publicly, Ben had an important conversation with Alistair. The company planned to restructure. Some positions would shift or be outsourced. Ben suggested that Alistair could form a small consultancy and work part-time. This would free him from the office environment altogether, letting him perform his duties from a distance. Alistair was stunned. "You really think the higher-ups would approve me as a consultant?" "They've agreed to outsource for exactly your skill set," Ben answered. "I can get them to sign off on it. You'd be contracted for the hours they need. You could stay in this city, work from home, and—" He paused with a hopeful smile. "Maybe move in with me?" It was a huge step. Alistair spent a week pondering it. On one hand, it offered a chance to work in comfort, even continuing to present as Allison full-time if he chose. On the other, he worried about relying so heavily on a romantic partner. But his growing feelings for Ben and his eagerness for a life where he wasn't forced to hide his interests pushed him forward. He accepted. 2 months later, the paperwork was done. Alistair's old lease ended, and he gathered his belongings. Most of his furniture went into storage. The main trunk of Allison's clothing and personal items went to Ben's place. On the day he arrived with the last of his boxes, Claire and her new partner came over to celebrate. Alistair, dressed in a soft, stylish outfit that combined comfort and elegance, welcomed them at the door. Claire greeted him with an enormous hug. "Never imagined this back when we first met at that after-work pub," she said, laughing. "You're glowing." Ben stood off to one side, smiling warmly. He and Claire exchanged a friendly nod, having buried the awkward tensions of the past. Claire's partner was equally polite, admiring the grand view from the windows. After a casual dinner, they departed, leaving Alistair and Ben to share a quiet evening. Alistair sank onto the living room sofa, letting out a breath. "So," he said, scanning the apartment, "this is my home now." Ben joined him, passing a glass of juice. "That's right, and tomorrow you'll tackle that new work project from here, which might leave us free for a late breakfast." Alistair smiled and sipped. "I can't help thinking about how far things have come. Remember the days you never called on me in meetings? And now, here we are." They leaned in, resting their foreheads together, content in each other's presence. The city lights glowed outside, and inside, a calm sense of trust took hold. There were no more second-guessing stares from co-workers, no more anxieties about being overlooked. Instead, Alistair had found the space to express himself honestly, wearing the clothes that felt right to him and living in a comfortable environment with a man who respected him. A few days later, Claire texted, telling Alistair that people at the office had noticed his absence, but heard about his new consultancy role. Nobody seemed upset. In fact, a couple of the quieter colleagues had begun volunteering opinions in team meetings, inspired by how the workplace atmosphere was changing under Ben's new style. Claire joked that she might actually get that next promotion, though she teased that she'd still never be part of the tall alpha crowd. Alistair texted back that her chances were excellent. Gone were the days of an old-fashioned hierarchy where only certain types advanced. Ben's outlook on leadership had shifted significantly, and the reshuffling meant real talent was getting recognized. He read her reply with a chuckle and tucked his phone away, leaning back in his home office chair. He could hear Ben in the adjacent kitchen, preparing a pot of coffee before they both settled in to work on their respective tasks. Looking around at the desk, a scattering of documents waiting for his analysis, Alistair felt a surge of determination. He had an entirely new path ahead. He would still rely on his skills, whether wearing neatly pressed slacks or a tasteful blouse and skirt. And with Ben at his side, he no longer worried about passing unnoticed in a crowd or fumbling for words in a meeting. Whether in the professional realm or on nights out in the city, he had found a partner who genuinely valued what he brought to the table. From time to time, Alistair still met Claire for a friendly drink, joined by her partner. They'd talk about the new era at the firm, the fresh hires, and how nobody suspected that the well-dressed consultant emailing them from home was often wearing heels while finalizing spreadsheets. Claire would joke about wanting Alistair's advice on accessories. Sometimes they laughed about that first awkward conversation, where she half-jokingly suggested he try something different to stand out, never guessing how far that idea would take him. Yet there he was. A new life, still a project in progress, but full of genuine moments. Alistair no longer questioned whether he could find happiness on his own terms. He simply stepped into the next day with confidence. And every weekend, in a sleek apartment overlooking the city, he and Ben would share late breakfasts, take walks, or curl up on the sofa watching documentaries about places they hoped to visit. Occasionally, they'd go to that old bar where Claire once introduced Alistair to a whole new world, and they'd toast to how it all began. Though neither man boasted a story that fit neatly into anyone else's expectations, they had charted a course that worked for them. Late one evening, some months after Alistair had fully settled in, they sat in the living room with the city lights flickering below. He wore his comfortable nightwear, a simple satin set that felt soft against his skin. Ben had an arm around him, lazily scrolling through an online menu for a late-night snack delivery. Alistair spotted an old photo on the coffee table, a snapshot of the entire team from a project's wrap-up party a long time ago. He smiled, remembering how he'd been almost invisible in those days. "Hey," he murmured, "you've changed a lot since then." Ben followed his gaze. "I hope it's for the better. I used to push people aside and only see a certain type. Didn't realize what I was missing." Alistair leaned in closer. "I'm just grateful you finally noticed me." They shared a gentle laugh, the warm hush of the apartment embracing them. Alistair understood that this arrangement was unusual, and in many ways, it had tested his courage, but it was also profoundly comforting. The differences in their backgrounds and personal journeys had brought them together in ways neither could have predicted. "Shall we order some food?" Ben asked, lightly rubbing Alistair's shoulder. "Yes, something sweet, if possible." While Ben tapped away at his phone, Alistair gazed once more out at the skyline. He remembered the timid young man he'd been, wanting to get noticed in a crowded team. If someone had told him he'd be living part-time as Allison, forging a relationship with the very boss whose approval he once craved, he'd have dismissed it as impossible. But here they were, building a life that, for all its small complications, made sense to them. A few minutes later, the app confirmed their delivery. They had a moment to share a quiet kiss. The city's hum was still audible through the windows, music from distant streets, the sound of late-night traffic. Alistair felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, even if that place was not what he ever imagined at the start of his career. He closed his eyes, letting the low hum of nighttime calm him. Whatever tomorrow might bring, further changes at work, new challenges as a consultant, or new chapters in his partnership with Ben, he knew that he could handle it. And next time he met Claire for a catch-up, he might laugh at how a casual conversation and a walk into a certain bar set so many events in motion. For now, he was content. They heard the buzzer indicating the delivery driver had arrived, and Ben stood up. "Be right back," he said with a grin. Alistair nodded, staying curled on the couch. He looked down at the ring Claire once gave him for accessorizing. Just a piece of costume jewelry, but it reminded him of those first nights out, how nerve-wracking and thrilling they'd been. Soon, Ben returned with a paper bag holding aromatic pastries and a couple of extra treats the cafe had included. Alistair pulled out plates while Ben found napkins. The hour was late, but they both felt comfortable with a little indulgence. Laughing over an unfortunate spillage of sugar on the coffee table, they helped each other clean up, shoulders bumping in companionable closeness. When the plates were finally set aside, they returned to the sofa. Ben slipped an arm behind Alistair, pulling him gently against his side. The overhead light buzzed softly, while lamps cast warm circles on the floor. Together, they enjoyed each other's company, knowing that in the morning they could wake up and greet the day in a space that felt like home for both of them. It had been a winding road to reach this point, a path full of small acts of bravery, chance meetings, and unexpected lessons. Yet it led them here, in a place where Alistair's quieter nature found a voice through a style all his own, and where Ben, once the intimidating manager, discovered how to lead with genuine warmth. With the city as their backdrop and a new chapter unfolding each day, they looked ahead, ready for whatever life brought next.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.